having too many interests. So throughout my life, I have struggled with being interested in many things and pursuing those many different things. So I've always found myself with different career paths, with different, just different big interests that I dedicate part of my time. And I use the word struggle not because it's actually difficult to become interested in many things and pursue them, but because they actually, they create a lot of joy. That's the initial reason why you become very interested in something and decide to pursue it. But it becomes a struggle in a world where we are constantly told that, that linearity is the best path. And in a world that is telling us that, that we need to niche down or have a very palatable and straightforward way of explaining ourselves. And I mean, for any human being, just because we are ridiculously complex, that can be difficult. But specifically for probably somebody neurodivergent or somebody specifically with ADHD, this can even feel more difficult because the experience of being interested in something is not, it's not just something that you can kind of look at and, and test for a little while and, and then let go. Once an interest or a hyper focus hits you, it feels like your whole being and your whole life purpose is about that, and it becomes difficult to to not do it. It becomes difficult to feel that that's not a good thing to spend your time in, that you should continue creating your career or building your business or whatever. And it also feels that specifically in this place where the world is today, where we rely so heavily on online interaction to interact with others. I mean, nowadays, whatever you're trying to do, if you're starting an NGO, if you are an artist, if you are starting a business, if you're whatever you do, if you're a plumber, an electrician, a boater, whatever you're trying to do, there's a sensation that you have to have an online presence, and that's, I mean, it's difficult to get away from that. The way in which we communicate to others, who we are and what we do is heavily online these days, and it feels that the message is to constantly follow a very specific path and and just build on that path, and narrow it down even further and continue on that path and narrow it even further. And to somebody who has various interests and who is very aware of our complexity, this becomes not only difficult, but it can also come with, with feelings of, feeling that you're not good enough, or that you're flaky, that you're not, building a solid career, that you're not building a personal brand that is clear, whatever label you want to give it. And if you're new here, the labels that, that could best describe me at this moment is I'm an actor, I'm an artist, I'm a therapist, and in this space I'm also starting to talk about my neurodivergence, because it's been a really big part of my experience in these past 2 years since I kind of assumed it or discovered it. So I'm ADHD, which means that I'm autistic and have ADHD. And these, even having these 3 labels professionally, actor, artist, and therapist, they don't necessarily, overlap or interact. I mean, I'll tell you in a moment how I feel that we can find our underlying thread, which is a big component, and I think they do overlap in many ways. But it feels like, depending on the context, I have to either say I'm an actor, or I'm an artist, or I'm a therapist. And up to a certain point in my life, it was, I felt that the only way in which I could kind of assume that I was this or I was that was if I could point at, kind of like a body of work, or something to prove and validate that I was what I was saying that I am. And and that's also, I don't know, it's it becomes tricky when you have when you have pursued many things, because to the outside world it also feels like like you're not that, I don't know, that professional in one of the endeavors that you that you pursue, or that you're not, I don't know, that serious about one thing or the other. And I mean, and I say that this has been difficult specifically in that sense, in kind of finding, or struggling with how do we narrow our identities down to like a very specific phrase or two phrases that that you can convey to the world so they can understand what you are. And it has always felt very limiting in a sense, and I think that's one of the reasons why I started pursuing art, because art is kind of like an umbrella under which I can kind of nest various of my interests. And if I become very interested in researching something specifically, I can always kind of say that it's an art project, and then create something tangible from that special interest or hyper focus. But just to give you not an example, but to share my experience. I started university when I was really young, and at that time I was very interested in dance. But I thought that dedicating my life to art was selfish. I was very young. So I decided to study political science. I was between pedagogy and political science because I was interested in education, but I went with political science because I wanted to impact the whole educational system in my country. That, I won't go into the details, but I started interning when I was in university in a branch of the Mexican government, and I absolutely hated it. It was a very macho environment. So I left that, and I started, for reasons that that I won't get into, but I started VJing a television show, and that kind of led me back into the art world in a sense. And and from that, I also knew that I didn't necessarily want to continue being a VJ for the rest of my life, and I decided to study acting. So I started my acting training and my acting career, and that has probably been the most, linear, stable path, which, now thinking about it, provides enough structure and routine for my autistic part of my brain, but also enough nuance and excitability and and different research that kind of feeds my ADHD, because acting projects, maybe they can last between a few days up to a few months, and you are always meeting new people, and you're researching the the new things that your character does, so it it provides a lot of new things. Then I started feeling that acting was a bit constraining, because I didn't feel that I could fully express my my artistic self or something. So I went on this trip to Scandinavia. I studied with this theater anthropologist, and that just kind of blew my mind into the to the possibilities of what art could look like. So I started doing artworks as well. And so by this time, I could say that, I was an actor and an artist. And then for other reasons as well, I started getting very much into kind of spirituality, and that led me into therapy, and it was such a transformative experience for me to go through a body-mind therapy process that I decided to train myself as well. And in between all of these, I also, at some point, I got very excited about renewable energy because there was a new reform in Mexico. So I spent a year working on a project that had to do with renewable energy. And, and then once again, I was faced with, Mexican politics, and I decided I didn't want to do that. And, so I'm kind of telling you this just so you get a picture of the the various different interests. And the thing about the experience of becoming interested in something, hyper-focused in something, and, and actually treating it as a life path is that, we all have things that, that we like to do, let's say outside of work. Maybe you like knitting, maybe you like, I don't know, running. But the experience of, I'll say that it's the experience of being neurodivergent, and just because both autism and ADHD can come with hyperfocus and special interest. But the thing is that it's not, it's not just something that that you like doing in your free time. When you get kind of taken by, and there are a lot of, there's probably like a religious holiday somewhere around here. Anyhow, when when you get interested in something, it's not just, it's not just something that you can, grab, do for a few minutes and, and leave, and that'll be it. The experience is that, that it kind of takes your whole body, your whole mind, and you feel that there's nothing else in the world that you can do other than that. And that's why it's very difficult to, to kind of just continue this linear path. In my case, let's say acting, and not decide to take this detour for art, or this other detour for renewable energy, or or whatever it is. I'll give you an example of one time. I was I had already started doing artworks, but I was working as an actor primarily, and I was in the middle of recording a TV series. And I remember that one night I discovered the work of an artist, a Swiss artist called Emma Kunz. And I just felt, I was so taken by, by her work and by the experience of the artworks that I was making and the overlaps, and to the point where I felt that I was not going to be able to do anything other than that for the rest of my life. It was such a powerful experience that I started thinking about how I would tell the production that I wouldn't be able to continue in the TV series. I started thinking about what I would tell my manager, so they would help me get out of the TV series. And it just to give you the example of how powerful it is. Luckily I didn't quit, and and that kind of feeling of complete, takeover of my system dissipated, and I was able to continue the artworks, but also continue the TV series and my acting career. But essentially, these various paths that we that we pursue because we have all these interests don't necessarily go well or pair well with what the world kind of expects in terms of linearity and and progression. And if this has happened to you, I'm sure you might have had people telling you, that you're, get your act together, or stop being so flaky, decide something that you want to do. And it's not, and those can also impact the way in which you feel about yourself. And, and it can be very discouraging because, as I mentioned, it doesn't feel that it's something, that you can take lightly. It feels that it's this new thing that you just want to dedicate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you genuinely feel that, that's going to be your life's purpose. I don't know if it's happened to you, but with so many new hobbies that I acquire or have, I start even, strategizing and thinking, how this is going to become, the thing that I'm going to pursue in life. And I start creating, strategizing for all these projects that I'm going to do with this, and how, even some of them, even, I start thinking about making them into a business. And I have done that, I have had interests and ideas that I feel so passionate about for a little while, and I don't, and before knowing my neurodivergence, I wouldn't kind of allow it to, to settle down and actually be able to, make a more informed choice of how to, how to carry it on into the future. So I, as I said, for instance, in that renewable energy project, I spent most of my savings, and I spent, a lot of time during a year, pursuing that. I also started another business, related to an art project that I was very excited about. And, so it does come with a lot of risk to, to kind of allow yourself to be fully taken by, by this new interest. And also as I mentioned, the view from the outside world towards you is many times that you're not, that you don't know what you're doing, that you're just kind of, like a chicken without a head. Oh, that's such a bad image. But yeah, just somebody kind of like, looking at shiny things and going after them. Now, the other part that I wanted to talk about is the part of the identity. I will make a distinction between what identity is and what our self is, I guess, like outer identity and, and our essence, or who we really are, because I think those are very different things. The identity that I'm talking about in this video has to do with kind of like the set of traits that we, that we kind of define ourselves for us to be able to share with the world who we are. Because the inner identity, even though I don't think identity is the right word, but our inner essence is just, that's what we are, that's who we are. We could call it our true nature if we're talking Buddhist terms, or, however you want to call it, but that's a different thing. The core of who you are is something, and then something different is the, kind of like the set of phrases that you use to tell another one who you are when they ask you, what do you do? And so the question for me is, or the thing that I also maybe worry about is, I think that we're such complex beings just as is, and we can think about, our analytical mind, our bodies, but even if we think further, our energetic beings, our spiritual path, whatever you want to include in this mix, but essentially we are ridiculously complex. And in language, either verbal or or written language is, it's a kind of like very flat deconstruction of the complexity that we are. You can even test it whenever you. For instance, if you're looking at, the most beautiful sunset, or, you're having, a very beautiful experience looking at this lake, or, whatever it is that you find beauty in. All the things that you're feeling and that you're thinking about this thing that you're experiencing, if somebody asks you, what is it that you're experiencing, you have to kind of grab all of that and translate it into something that we call phrases and words. And even though it's, of course, it's an amazing tool for communicating with others, it's also a very limited tool. And I mean, that takes me to another little kind of like side path, which has to do with how I feel that we rely too heavily on our analytical mind, and we kind of have, put completely aside our, our symbolic mind, our symbolic experience. Maybe if you're an artist, or if if you're, I mean, we're all creative people, but if you do something in life, or if you're really in tune with your creative side, or I don't know, you might be, more in tune with this. But usually in this world that we live in, we are, since we are children and we grow up, we are constantly kind of told that, that's not a part that we really need for living in this world. I mean, as an example, constantly if a child has a dream, or has a bad dream even, or, maybe they have an imaginary friend, or they're talking to plants, or, whatever doesn't really fit into, like the very rational aspect of who we are, we tend as a society to, to say things like, snap back to reality, or, oh, it was just a dream. And slowly we start to kind of understand that all of that part of who we are and how we translate the world is not necessarily that useful. As I said, maybe if you're an artist, you still tap into it, but usually it's not, I don't know, it's not something that we currently use and talk about. We might use it as a, like as an extraordinary experience. If, we're saying, oh, this very strange thing happened to me the other day, and I saw the clouds and I got an insight. But it's not something that, that is current in our interaction. We don't use it for, for communicating with others. Usually we don't use it for, for kind of like our societal systems. So this adds another layer of, I feel, flattening our experience, because not only are we not, using all these other, like tools that we have at our disposal for communicating with others, which aren't only verbal language, but, by trying to reduce that complexity of who we are into just words, it's kind of narrowing down who we are to a ridiculous extent. And then if added to that, we as a world are telling everybody today that, that we need to be very specific with, with how we describe ourselves, and, niche down and find the niche of the niche and the niche of the niche. And, and we have to be able to, in a few words in our social media bio, say who we are. It just feels like we are constantly narrowing ourselves down and further down. And and I know that it has to do, what I'm talking about essentially in terms of having an online presence and being able to communicate who you are, through this medium is, it has a lot to do with, like understanding the algorithm, and, how are you going to, get other people to understand what you're about, very clearly and fast. But I worry if, I don't know if the right word is worry, but I think about, what this will do to us as well, having to constantly kind of flatten ourselves into something very palatable for the other to very quickly understand. And I don't know, if you're compelled to share your thoughts on the comments about this, I'd be happy to read them. But yeah, that's something that I think about. And I guess the last part that I wanted to talk about is that, I was thinking about it as, the underlying thread of all the kind of interest that we have, because I think there is ultimately always an underlying thread with everything. And today I was also thinking that it overlaps with, with something that has to do with therapy and our kind of like our path to being better. In Jungian terms, our individuation path. And essentially, when I started acting, I remember that, when people would ask me, how did you end up, acting? And I would say, oh, it's the strangest thing. I have absolutely no idea how I ended up in this. It's a matter of fate, or I don't know. But the reality is that it wasn't strange that I got into acting, because I mean, I was interested in the human being, in the human experience, and that has been an underlying thread with almost everything that I have done. When I was interested in dancing, and dancing has a lot to do with expression and being in tune with your body. When I studied political science, but the underlying reason why I wanted to study that was, I was interested in pedagogy. So that also has to do with, with being interested in, in the human experience and how we're put together and how our minds work and how our emotions work. Then acting is a super clear example of this, because in acting, essentially we work with our body. So we have to be very in tune with, how our bodies react to emotions, which emotions trigger what. And then when you are on stage or in front of a camera, the most important part is, being present there for the other person and being very in tune about the relation that is being generated, between these two characters or however many they are. But so the thread continues. And then, studying therapy and, all these spiritual paths is just an extension of that. Therapy is I don't need to explain it. It's really clear. It's, trying to, understand our experience as humans. And, and the spiritual part is essentially the same thing, just at a different level, at a, let's say, I don't know, more subtle level, for a lack of a different word. And an art essentially, has to do with that as well. Even though, my body of work is, I don't know, it's very, I've tested many mediums and I work with, with various things. The themes that, that I can see in my artwork are very clear. They're constantly, investigating all these things that I've investigated through acting, through therapy. So I think there is always a, like an underlying thread of, in terms of what are those things that are catching your eye. And now if I speak in, kind of like in therapy terms or even spiritual terms, we could even throw in the word karma if that doesn't, put you off. But it all has to do with, we're on a path to, to grow, however you understand that. It can be a spiritual path or even just being a better person, in this physical life. So, unconsciously, we know the things that, I don't know, that kind of have, like created bumps in our lives, like knots in our experience. And unconsciously, we're always, facing or pursuing things that will help us, kind of like undo those knots. And even our interests, I think, have that underlying purpose as well. And I'm sure that if you, I've given you my example, but if you look at the set of interests that you have had throughout your life, which I feel make you, a complex person, and it's completely fine to have many interests, I think that you might find, a few underlying themes that can give you kind of a pointer or a direction of what it is that, that at a deeper level you are trying to understand or learn or, figure out. And I find that very beautiful. So, I guess I'll just end with saying that I think the complexity of, who we are as human beings is quite beautiful. And I don't think we should flatten it down. On the contrary, I think it's something that is worth exploring and pursuing. And if that means taking a little bit more time to getting to know somebody, that's fine. I know that you might also be thinking, well, that's a completely separate thing to trying to, let's say, start a business. I understand the idea behind being very specific about, what you're offering if you're having a business. But I just find it a little bit problematic as well that everything is about, a business in our current world. Even if you're just, having a social media presence today. And I don't know, I don't necessarily have like a big insight about that or a solution, but it's just I don't know, it's just a question, I guess, that I will leave you with. And yeah, I'm gonna go have brunch with my friend now. I'll end by saying that if you got to this point, thank you so much for watching the video. This is the fourth time that I've been trying to record it. I don't even know if this is going to work. The first few times it was an issue with audio, then not enough storage space, and then, the issues with transferring stuff and editing, and anyhow. And the last time that I tried to record this, it was a very specific and special day for me. So, I don't know, I just want to bring that energy as well into this video, because it feels that we're just in such a transition moment right now. And I'm definitely experiencing it. I'm experiencing because I'm about to move to the UK, because I'm now starting kind of like my 40s journey, because I now feel that more mature in terms of understanding my neurodivergence, because of many things. But I also feel that that it's something that's happening in the world right now. And yeah, I don't know. I guess my intention is just to I don't know. Like I guess I hope that we can resonate with each other and and help each other in these transition processes that we might be going through, because they can be challenging. And yeah, so anyhow, thank you very much for watching. See you next time. And yeah, big kisses. Bye.